Greetings, comrades, and welcome back to another episode of Comrade Cast. And I have been putting this off this week. I have been postponing because not only is it once again super hot here in Edmonton, and the thing is, right, when you talk about a place where it's 35 degrees in the summer, there are plenty of places where that's perfectly normal. That's exactly what is expected of the weather there. Here, such heat is not expected, and all of the houses here are designed to entrap every little bit of heat that they possibly can to make sure that they're livable during the winter, so during the summer it can be unbearable. I have also been putting this episode off because I keep thinking Joe Biden's going to call it quits. He's going to end it at some point, and I don't want to put out an episode just for him to drop out of the race a couple days later. As of recording, obviously, that still has not happened, but we'll get into that. We want to talk about the major topic for this episode, which is, of course, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, the moment where the entire political landscape changed, this entire election changed, and, of course, we're going to parse out some of the details that we know so far. One of the nice things is that now that we're coming at this a couple days after the fact, we can approach it with some of the more relevant information which has come out in that time frame. So without further ado, let us jump right into the big political topic, the big topic of, at least so far in the 2020s. And there have been quite a lot of important things that have happened in this current decade. And right here, I want to start with this picture. And this is the picture that captured the bullet in kind of mid-frame. This is one of the crazy things about modern technology is we have these ridiculously high frame rate cameras. They are able to take a picture of a bullet in midair. It's incredible, and it's also incredible that they were able to take this shot at this moment. So just a quick recap. At 6:11 p.m. during a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, the former President Donald Trump was shot at and the bullet grazed his ear. And of course, he was able to survive this assassination attempt. However, there were some people in the crowd that were shot and killed during this attempt. And of course, the shooter themselves, the suspect themselves, was shot and killed during the attempt. What really shows to me is how incredibly lucky Donald Trump is, because as you can see, the moment just before the bullet is about to hit his ear, he's turned, right? He's facing like this. I don't know what he's doing exactly in the rally. He's talking, he's pointing, his face is off to the side, and this allows the bullet to basically graze right past his ear. And if he hadn't turned his head like that in that moment, it probably goes through his temple. So that subtle motion in that moment probably saved his life. So if you watch, we're not going to watch the whole video again. I'm sure many of you guys have seen it several times now. But if you watch the video, they take the shot at Trump. He grabs his ear, he sees that something's wrong. They say, get down. Everybody says, get down, and gets down on the ground. And you hear maybe 5 or 6 more shots before Secret Service finally is able to incapacitate him. It's at this point in which Secret Service gets Donald Trump back up to his feet. And that's the point where he lifts up his fist and he says, fight. And this picture is taken in what will probably become one of the most iconic political photos, at least of this decade, maybe even our lifetimes. We can't say that much for sure, but certainly of this decade. After which, of course, Trump was rushed to the hospital. His ear was bandaged up, and he's been back at it pretty much the day after since this assassination attempt happened. So he's rebounded from this assassination attempt extremely quickly. And like I said, he is already out there on the campaign trail doing speeches. He was just at the Republican National Convention where it was a pretty unhinged display. Really weird stuff happening there, but that's beyond the scope of this video for now. So that's what's happened to Donald Trump. Let's move on to the shooter, what we know about the shooter. To execute the attack themselves, basically what they did was they crawled up onto a roof. It was approximately 200 meters away from the rally where Donald Trump was speaking. So there was like a lot of questions initially, like how did he get through? How did he get a gun into the rally? Well, it wasn't inside the rally, it was outside the rally. And from that vantage point, he was able to, of course, see Trump and able to make his assassination attempt fire off about half a dozen shots before he was incapacitated. And this particular circumstance has arisen a great many questions. The Secret Service has been under fierce scrutiny since this happened. Rightly, it's your job to prevent assassination attempts against presidential figures, current or former, or in some cases, even those running for presidential campaigns. Ultimately, the responsibility lies in a failure with them and a failure to prevent this assassination attempt. But there have been, like I said, a number of questions as to why the Secret Service was not able to prevent this. While I was looking for the material I was looking for, I found this great picture here that really outlines exactly how things went down. As you can see over in the corner here, we have the location of the shooter's body, where he was taking the shots. And then from here, this is where the rally attendee was killed. This is where Trump was and the assassination attempt occurred. And then over here, a few more rally attendees were injured as the bullets continued on their trajectory. So this isn't the exact story that I was looking for. Suspected gunman was seen with a rangefinder and duffel bag before shooting. Sources say the suspected gunman at former President Trump's rally on Saturday was seen with a rangefinder and a duffel bag ahead of the deadly shooting, multiple law enforcement sources claimed to ABC News. The one story I was looking specifically for is that it had an actual time frame in which law enforcement saw this guy. They said that they saw him approximately 30 minutes, or the reports 30 minutes, that he was coming in with a rifle before he actually was able to get into position and fire. There was initially a very famous interview. This rally goer was a local in the area. He was interviewed by BBC, and he was telling how he saw the gunman before he was able to actually fire. He saw him climbing up the roof. He saw him with a rifle and everything like that. But in that interview, the guy says that he saw a cop, is I believe what he says, like a law enforcement guy, not necessarily Secret Service, could be local law enforcement, and tried to tell him what was going on, seeing, hey, I see a guy with a rifle climbing over here, do something about it. And there had been a lot of questions as to exactly what happened, why this kind of failure of communication happened, what's going on. One of the things that is very unique among, I guess you could say, American law enforcement is they have the issue quite a lot of too many cooks in the kitchen. American law enforcement is always subdivided into different agencies, and even within jurisdictions, there's multiple agencies. Do the sheriffs take this over, or is it the city police force's job, or is it the state job, or is it the federal job, right? There's a whole bunch of different questions, and a lot of times there's overlapping jurisdictions, overlapping mandates, and a lot of the time all these like law enforcement officials descend on an area, and you know that classic like South Park joke where, you know, the FBI rolls up and he's, who's in charge here? And then the local cop comes up, he's, I'm in charge. He's not anymore, I'm in charge. And the local cop's like, no, I'm in charge. Right? And they bicker back and forth. And then a third guy comes in and be like, okay, I'm Secret Service right now. I'm in charge. I'm the one taking head of this operation. And nobody can quite agree upon who's doing what, whose job is whose. And it ends up this disorganized clusterfuck, especially in emergency circumstances, because in emergency circumstances, you need information to flow to the appropriate sources as cleanly and quickly as possible.
You had your shot, now I'm in charge. Not anymore, you're not. Orders just came down from Central. They want ATF handling this on all fronts. All right, people, from now on, you're answering to me. Not anymore, they're not. Orders from the president. He wants this handled by his staff personally. Now Nelson is in charge. Not anymore, I'm not.
So if I put myself in the position of what this local law enforcement, that is, if he's local law enforcement, if he's like some sort of like private security guard, then there's like really nothing that guy can do. But if he's local law enforcement, what you should do if you're in that circumstance is that you call it up. Basically, you call it up to your supervisors. You say, I have a report of a gunman. I can see them. This is what's going on, so on and so forth, and effectively elevate that information up the chain of command. And there's a lot of questions like, well, why wouldn't this guy, if he was alerted to somebody and maybe he can see a guy on the roof, why isn't he going to do something? Well, the thing is, he might have a pre-assigned duty, right? He might be directing traffic, or he might supposed to be patrolling an area or doing who knows what. And there's a lot of conflicting training in terms of what you are supposed to do in a situation like that. And it can vary from force to force, right? In some circumstances, you are trained to operate on a triage system where if you see something that is more important, you are supposed to abandon whatever your preordained duties are and go and deal with a thing that is to be perceived to be more important. In other forces, that kind of mentality is severely punished. And if you deviate from whatever your prescribed orders are, you will be punished by your superiors. But the important thing is that at least if you elevate that information to your superiors, you have then gotten the ball rolling, and then it's up to them to figure out what to do. And that is unfortunately that point where you can have the no, I'm in charge, no, I'm in charge type of scenarios. But you would hope, right, that the Secret Service, who you would assume be the taking point on this operation, would be the ones organizing everything. There were reports that Secret Service had requested a local police cruiser to that specific building where the shooter was, and they were denied that request by local police service. They said they would be unable to provide that cruiser. And that's what happens when you get this serious information comes up, maybe from local law enforcement. Does local law enforcement, hopefully they do what they're supposed to do and pass this on to the Secret Service? Do we get this kind of too many cooks in the kitchen type of scenario where everyone's trying to do their own thing, but you really need some cohesive voice to be giving direction? It's pretty clear that somebody fucked up, I think, pretty badly here. I do think that this is like a Secret Service fuck up. No, I don't think this is some grand conspiracy theory or anything like that. We're going to look more into the shooter's potential motives and background and things like that. But I do definitely suspect that there was some sort of failure here. My main suspect is a failure of communication, a failure of handing off important information to relevant parties so they could make the actual decisions that needed to be made. Regardless, though, there is going to be an investigation, and I think that's perfectly reasonable. That's perfectly okay, right? Just as long as the investigation is conducted in a forward and unbiased manner. But now I want to talk a little bit about what we know about the shooter's motives. But before we get there, I do want to say something really quick. Sorry about the abrupt change. Had to take a little break. My wife ordered pool off of Amazon, just small backyard one. Took a break to help her set it up. Was starting to sweat like a motherfucker out there. So I went and had a shower, now I'm back. But before we talk about the motive for the would-be assassin of Trump, I want to talk a little bit about how I feel about this personally and just get my own message out, which is that if you guys have been listening to this podcast for any period of time, my personality is I'm a pretty hippy-dippy guy. I want everybody to get along. I don't want anybody to fight each other. So for all the political disagreements I have with the former president, I absolutely in no way, shape, or form wish him to be hurt, assassinated, taken out in some sort of violent manner. Because not only is vouching for and wanting the death of your political opponents, in my opinion, completely immoral, completely unethical. If you were to actually assassinate Trump and take him out in some sort of violent manner, he would effectively become a martyr. He would become probably rehabilitated over time and seen as a much more positive force than he really was, and probably ends up doing a lot of harm to the country, because that's the kind of thing that can ignite the powder keg that America is clearly currently sitting on. And for me, I've always felt that, or at least my opinion has always been, that politics is the way for us to arrange society and mediate our disagreements without the need for violence, right? That politics, by its very nature, should denecessitate the need for violence because it's a different way of resolving our differences. If you really want to defeat Trump, it needs to be soundly defeated at the ballot box or through some other political means. Ideally, I would like him to incur some sort of legal penalty for the multitude of crimes which he has obviously committed, though it seems like that kind of goal is getting further and further away, as we just recently saw the classified documents case get thrown out. So I will take quiet retirement for Trump at this point. that is what I would be happy with. The thing I've always believed is that Trump is a symptom of the ills within the political system. He is not the cause. And if you get rid of him, you just treat a symptom, the underlying causes which gave birth to Trump and gave birth to the kind of political movement we're seeing today haven't gone away. And the left is never going to be able to deal with it if it holds on to these neoliberal hacks who it just desperately seems to not want to let go of. Because neoliberalism is inherently an anti-populist ideology, it cannot deal with a populist resurgence in conservatism. It cannot deal with the populist energy that Donald Trump brings to the Republican Party. It's part of the thing that we saw in France in the French election, that neoliberalism effectively not able to stand against the far right. You need some sort of actual populist left alternative with a vision, with a purpose to stand against the far right. So even if you were able to incapacitate Trump somehow, whether that's legally, whether it's through assassination attempt, again, that doesn't deal with the underlying causes. Generally speaking, people see their quality of life decreasing, and politicians are ascribing a myriad of scapegoats to that. And it's pretty easy, I think, to get people to tribalize once you see their quality of life decreasing. It's very anxiety provoking. But anyway, neoliberalism, neoconservatism, whatever you want to say, doesn't have a proper answer to these problems because it by and large created them in the first place. And ultimately, I don't feel any ill will towards supporters of the former president or any. Ultimately, I do feel that by and large, a lot of these disenfranchised working class people are very easily persuaded by an actual populist left platform and an actual populist left policy tailored towards their needs. But the Democratic neoliberal establishment is very unconcerned with those types of issues. So I generally tend to look at Trump supporters as people who are more misguided than the enemy or an existential threat or anything like that. I just wanted to make my stance on that very explicitly clear. Obviously, political violence is abhorrent. I condemn it in the absolute strongest of terms. Now let's spend some time talking a little bit about the individual who caused said political violence, Thomas Matthew Crooks. And right now here, Wikipedia has done a good job in distilling a lot of the information that we know. Generally speaking, I don't like to go with Wikipedia as a source for ongoing events or controversial events, particularly controversial events. Ongoing controversial events is probably the worst source possible because everybody comes in with their own political bias. They're all editing all the articles and it's just a fucking clusterfuck. But I was reading through the information here. It is a very good summarization of everything that has happened and everything about this individual that we know. So when it comes to what we know about this individual, I'll just read again right through his political activities right here. It has done a pretty good summarization, although there are some more things that have come into view that are not represented here. So when it comes to his political activities, authorities have stated that his political views are unknown and they have not yet determined whether or not this assassination attempt was politically motivated. Public records do not indicate his views, nor posts by Crooks on social media or writing has indicated his ideology to have been found. On January 17th, at the age of 17, he donated $15 to the Progressive Turnout Project, a liberal voter turnout group, through the Democratic Party donation platform, Act Blue. His donation was made on the same day President Biden was sworn into office. According to the Progressive Turnout Project, he made the donation in response to an email about tuning into the inauguration. He then unsubscribed from the group's mailing list in 2022. Crooks has been registered to vote since September 2021, the month he turned 18. He registered as a Republican. He had only voted once in the 2022 midterm elections. Prior to the shooting, Crooks had searched for images and the public appearances of Trump, President Joe Biden, Attorney General Merrick Garland, FBI Director Christopher A. Wray, and the Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton. He also made internet searches for major depressive disorder and the Oxford High School shooting, with authorities finding an arrest photograph of the Oxford shooter, Ethan Crumbley, on his phone. There we go. We have mixed consensus on this guy, although we do know he definitely unsubscribed from this progressive pack, because we can note that he removed himself from the email subscriber list, and that was shortly after he had registered as a Republican. There have been some conversations about whether or not his donation to this progressive pack was by somebody else with the same name. Unfortunately, I don't think that is the case, and I can show you guys why, because we actually have both his registration as a Republican and his receipt for this donation that he gave, and I'm going to show them both to you right now. All right, so here I have pulled up, we have the, let me just move that a touch so we can see everything. This is the receipt for his donation to that said progressive PAC. We have the name here, Act Blue. We have his name's Crooks Thomas. We don't have his middle name. He didn't put his middle name. The mailing address has been blotted out here. And then we have the city, Pittsburgh, the state, Philadelphia. But here's the point I want you to pay attention to, the zip code, which is 15102, 15102. And that is going to be important because, like I said, there have been some suggestions that this might have been somebody else. I don't think that's the case because we're going to look right here. This is his Republican registration. And we can see right here that this one doesn't have his address censored out. It's here, but we can see that it has the same zip code, 1510. Very likely that these are the same individuals. And of course, we can go on to note that this one has much more information. So it's very clear that this is the same individual who has registered Republican. It has all his names, first, middle, and last. And we can also see his date of birth, which puts him at 20 years old, which is exactly the age of the shooter. So it seems very unlikely that these two people would get mixed up. The only thing I can see which may happen is that he could have a similar situation that me and my dad have, which is that our first and last names are the same, but our middle names are different. It could be his dad with the same name is the one who gave to this pack. That, of course, is presumptive on the fact that, hey, his dad has the same name and was the one that gave that donation. No idea what his father's name is. Can't say. But yeah, looking through his early life and childhood here, doesn't say anything about what his parents' names are. Again, could be possible, but seems unlikely. And there have been some reports from his classmates that when it came to actual debates and political conversations within the school, a lot of his classmates have come out and said, yeah, he was really conservative. He gave off conservative vibes. But then some other of his classmates have come out and given not contradictory reports, but they said that he was more apolitical, right? He didn't seem that involved or interested in politics. When it comes to his political values, they are confused. There's contradictory evidence, but really, I think it's fair to say that he wasn't a raving radical on either side of the political spectrum, because let me tell you, raving radicals generally like to talk about their political beliefs and shout them from the rooftops. Personally, I was very relieved when it came out that this guy didn't seem like he was like a hardcore Antifa member or leftist communist. I hate Donald Trump. I'm coming to get all the Republicans. Doesn't seem like there's anything like that. And I worry if that had been the case, we would be talking civil war right now. You can already see that the rhetoric on the Republican side is pretty hot, even though Donald Trump has actually done a lot to try and cool things down. Reports from the people around him say he's actually being pretty zen. You know, he's actually having this weird kind of spiritual moment, which is good on him. But another reason why the Republicans are doing this, because they're doing what I call the pivot to normalcy for the general election, right? They want to leave a lot of the crazy radical political stuff behind them and pivot towards a more stable, normal seeming frame for the general electorate. But I've seen some pretty heated rhetoric from some of the people on the Republican side. But that being said, it's actually not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a lot worse. And if it was pretty clear that this guy was like definitely part of the left, yeah, I think that they would be begging for blood and it would be a really bad situation. But again, that doesn't seem like what this guy was. If there's anything, the evidence seems to indicate that he was more on the conservative side of the spectrum, especially towards his death. What all of this says to me, when we take all of the evidence that we have right now and analyze it and see why he did this and what his motivation was, personally, my thinking is that what we have is a, not necessarily like extremely disturbed individual, but somebody who wanted to die, who was thinking about dying, extremely depressed. And this was not only his way of committing suicide, but potentially taking a lot of people with him, and a lot of people with him in a very big way. What I feel like he wanted to do, or he was trying to do, was be like a Gavrilo Princip type of person. And for those of you who don't know, Gavrilo Princip is the guy who shot Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand, kicking off the First World War. And what tells me this is that this guy was not just searching for appearances from Trump, but he's searching for appearances from Biden, from the general secretary, any type of political figure that he thought that if he could assassinate or hurt or whatever, that would be the match which would light the powder keg and start some sort of maybe broader conflict. And that is my personal theory of why he did what he did, is that he wanted to die and he wanted to do it in a way that would ensure an explosion would happen afterwards. And again, if he had actually succeeded in assassinating Donald Trump, that could have been the match which blew up the powder keg. But right now, it seems like he lit that match and he threw it, and it came just an inch away from blowing up the powder keg. I do think that we are going to avoid more serious political violence, at least for the near future. Because this was such a close call, I think there are a lot of people stepping back and realizing what the fuck is going on? Where are we right now? What is happening to us as a country? At least I hope people are doing that. And from what I've been seeing, there is definitely a lot of that happening right now, but it's still a very precarious situation. Moving on to another very precarious situation, which is Joe Biden's continued election campaign. Just the other day, we had an announcement that Joe Biden came down with COVID, and this was just after he had made this announcement. If there's some kind of medical diagnosis, I will step out of the race. And wouldn't you know it, it's COVID, or excuse me, Jovid, as it's actually pronounced. So since we last convened and talked about Joe Biden's presidential nomination, we're doing this every week now, every week, countdown to Joe Biden stepping down. Last week it looked like the dam might hold and Joe Biden might survive. However, the floodgates might actually be breaking. We've had some pretty serious Democrats call upon Joe Biden to step down from this race. We had Chuck Schumer give him a very pointed message. We had Jeffrey Hawkins also give him a less pointed message, but still pretty clear. And then we had Nancy Pelosi herself basically say, you got to go, Joe. And then I by and large agree with this, that other figures like Obama are implicitly endorsing this with their silence. If they wanted to crush this dissent within the Democratic Party, especially Obama, he's extremely popular within the Democratic Party, within the Democratic establishment still. If he wanted to nip this in the bud, he could very easily. But that is not what is happening. We today, just now, I keep checking my phone. I keep thinking I'm going to see the alert that Joe Biden's stepping down. We are hearing that after these serious conversations, Joe Biden may step down this weekend. Fingers crossed that is actually what's going to happen, but we certainly don't know. What we are hearing today is that Joe Biden is rumbling that he feels betrayed, that all of these Democratic leaders are abandoning him. He's upset about it. I get it, but it's time to come to reality, Joe. And there just seems to be so many signs saying, you got to go. You're done. You got to go. So this from 1 minute ago saying apparently his coronavirus symptoms are easing. That's good. He's saying that he's going to try and get back on the campaign trail here. The thing about this, though, is one, I do get it, right? That having some kind of cold, having COVID, especially anything that affects your speech, affects your ability to talk, when you are trying to do anything which involves you talking or speaking, that's a death sentence, right? COVID like that is a complete death sentence. There have been many shows that I have had to miss because I get sick from my kids. They bring some home from daycare. I get it. And all of a sudden, I've got a horrific sore throat for the next week. But we are at a time when this is drawing such an incredible contrast with Trump, who is out there just after being shot, basically the day after campaigning at rallies. And it looks bad in comparison to Joe, especially with all of the questions he has been having about his age. Just as I predicted, virtually every interview he has, every time he's questioned publicly, it's all about some variation of, don't you think you're too old to run? And Joe Biden, forgive me, I'm not the best impression guy, but I will try and do an impression for Joe Biden here because he always has the same answer. He goes, people say I'm too old to do stuff, but I have done stuff and I can do stuff. Anyway. And that's his answer every single time. But yeah, it's not a good look for your campaign when you just have to continually reassure everybody that you are capable of basic functions. It's just a really struggle point to be in, especially with, what we're facing. This campaign is, again, I do think extremely important, not something that the Democrats should be blowing because this is a very easily winnable campaign. The only thing is that, goddamn, the leeches within the Democratic Party will not let go of their power. They would rather suck it dry and let the corpse fall than actually give up. But we had another poll coming out, something like 63% of Democrats saying they're unsatisfied with the presidential nominee versus 70% of Republicans. These days, especially in a polarized electorate, turnout is such a huge factor when you have so few independents and so few people left to make up their mind. It really does become a game of energizing your base and getting as much of your base out there to vote for you as possible. Listen, Joe Biden is not the man to energize the base. And let's be real, Kamala Harris, not really the woman to do that either. The woman is a charisma black hole, but at least she can make the argument. At least she can get the arguments out and actually speak. The woman has the actual capacity to be on the campaign trail. So I really thought that I was going to be able to come here for this episode and deliver you the good news that Joe Biden has finally called it quits. Unfortunately, that is just not the case. So the last thing I want to talk about before we leave here is Donald Trump's pick for vice president, J.D. Vance. I found this article. This is from the Toronto Star, obviously a Canadian publication. And not only that, this is one of the most left-leaning publications in our country. So when I saw a headline like this, why J.D. Vance's speech was a disaster for Democrats and a big win for Donald Trump coming from this left-leaning publication, it really got my eye. And this is the headline basically summarizes what I was trying to talk about earlier. What happens when the Trump ticket suddenly isn't acting so extreme? This is what we're seeing right now, the pivot towards normalcy, the pivot towards the center. This is an important part of the political process that Nixon explained, right? In the primaries, you run to the right if you're a Republican like he was. And then in the general, you try and equalize it out, become more centrist. Although now in the modern era, it's less about political ideology and more about political style. Act crazy for the base and then try and pivot towards normalcy for the general electorate. I was puzzled about J.D. Vance's choice as vice president for Donald Trump, and I can't really figure out what he is that he brings to Donald Trump's campaign. J.D. Vance, if you don't know, he is a senator from Ohio, which is strange. Ohio used to be a swing state back towards the earlier stages of my life. Now it seems to be a pretty solidly Republican state. It doesn't look like Ohio is moving out of the red column anytime soon. So putting a senator from Ohio on your ticket doesn't do a huge amount politically for you, at least in the state. It doesn't bring you a key swing state or anything like that. The only other thing I can think is that J.D. Vance, he's pretty evolved in more like union and working class issues. I could think that this might be a ploy for Trump to be like, we are the working class party. We got this guy that union guys really seem to like. So vote for us. I think there could be some of that going on. But even though J.D. Vance says a lot of extreme things, he is like Mike Pence in the sense that he does exhibit normalcy. He seems normal on the outside, although once you crack open what's inside, not so much. But he's also very loyal, supposedly more loyal than Pence was, and has said that he wouldn't have certified the 2020 election. That's very scary. But overall, there seems to be some questions, at least for me, seems to be some questions as to what exactly is J.D. Vance getting Donald Trump. And maybe it's like the star says here, it's that he seems to exude this air of normalcy and just as a regular guy. But you fucking son of a bitch. Fuck you, Toronto Star. Fuck you, and making me pay for your bullshit. I would read this article out on the podcast. Whatever. Jesus Christ, I hate that crap so much. And I get it. You got to pay for journalism, but at the same time, there are some like the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal that make you pay for their articles, but by and large, almost all right-wing outlets don't make you pay for them, which is way better, right? I was curious about this article. The headline got me curious, but I'm not going to fucking pay to read it, guys. I'm sorry. So that could be it, but maybe there's something else here because J.D. Vance and I actually have something in common, which is that, it doesn't have a picture of her. We are both married to Indian women. That is something I learned about him recently, that he is actually married to an Indian woman and has mixed race children. And the only reason I know about this is because this triggered a lot of the Republicans, that they're like, how can you have somebody who has mixed race children talk about white issues and white identity? So that's hilarious, right? That these people are policing the relationships of their politicians, that they want to make sure their politicians only love people within their certain race. And I'll tell you some guys that within the modern discourse, there is nothing which gets me more angry than when people start to talk against mixed race couples or mixed race children. As someone who has mixed race children, one of my most important goals in my lifetime is to try and create the type of world where they will have the most amount of comfort and success that they can possibly muster. And if we have a world where obviously we have these kind of people who are against race mixing and hate mixed race people, we cannot have that. And here's the thing, right? People 100% naturally want to mix races. They want to be with people who are outside of their kind of racial or cultural space. And the reason why this is obvious, is genetic diversity. Genetic diversity has long been proven to be a massive benefit to any species. So it makes sense that there would be an evolutionary push towards racial mixing. And the fact of the matter is that you have to, in order to stop people from getting into mixed race relationships, you have to build some sort of edifice on top of society to prevent that. You have to have some sort of national government which says that you can only, or encourages people to only marry within their own racial blocks. And the reason it does that is so the national government can have as many soldiers as it needs to. Religions also force people into same race relationships and prevent cultural mixing for similar reasons. The religion wants as many converts as it possibly can. If people from alternate religions are intermarrying, who knows what's going to happen? Maybe one person will convert, who knows what the child will be. So you have to basically build these structures on top of society in order to prevent people from doing what they want to do and what they're evolutionarily predisposed to do. Man, the problems with inbreeding and keeping things within your own circle are also very widely known. And you can see this with various dog breeds, which have been so severely inbred that they can barely function anymore. I have so many friends and family who, like morons, went and they spent like $1,000 on a purebred dog that has a fucking laundry list and a half of health issues. They're spending thousands of dollars at the vet to try and fix these issues. The dog can only eat certain things. It can't eat other things. It's just so expensive and it's such a headache. Versus my pooch, who is far and away the healthiest animal in my extended group. He's a mutt. We're not really sure what he is, but God damn it, that dog has an iron stomach. He's got an iron immune system. He's always happy. He's always healthy. And besides regular checkups and vaccinations, he has, knock on wood, been extremely reasonable. So yeah, anyway, long story short, you have to be the worst kind of racist in the 21st century to be against race mixing. And with that, you can maybe see that the heat is starting to get in here. And yeah, it's getting a little bit too much. So we're going to have to pack it in there. And I want to thank you guys for watching. This has been the Comrade, signing off for now. Until next time, you guys take care.